In this lecture, we will be discussing about how banks make profits. Now, as you all know, banks take in deposits, which we also call liabilities. So banks makes profit by selling liabilities with one set of characteristics, which is a particular combination of liquidity, risk, size, and return, and using the proceeds to buy assets with a different set of characteristics. This is known as asset transformation. Now, on the liability side, we have seen before in the previous lecture is deposits and also borrowings. Now, they take that money to transform into different kind of assets, and on the assets we have seen things like loans, things like buying government securities, or purchasing other forms of capital which can give banks a higher return. And whatever be the difference between the returns on the assets and the payments they need to make on the liabilities, it remains a bank profit. We will be discussing this using a bank account, also known as T account. So let's try to understand how the basic banking works with the cash deposits. So let's first do it the First National Bank, and this is a T account of a First National Bank. This is different from balance sheet because it's showing the changes in each of these categories, though it still has assets and liabilities, and it also needs to balance. So let's say the First National Bank has a vault cash or reserves of $100, and also it has a checkable deposits of $100. So somebody deposited a check of $100, which essentially means that it also becomes asset for the bank because they have a vault cash of $100. So opening a checking account leads to an increase in the bank's reserves equal to the increase in checkable deposits. Now let's talk about how check deposits work. Mind you, checks are written from one bank to another bank. So we'll talk about two different banks here. We'll start with First National Bank, and somebody suppose deposited a $100 check, which becomes a liability for the bank because bank now owes that money to the person who deposited the check. But at the same time, it increases their reserves by $100. Now let's talk about Second National Bank. So the check was written from a Second National Bank. So when you look at the T account of the Second National Bank, where actually liabilities go down by $100, because liabilities are down, so their reserves are also decreases by $100. Because the moment you write a check, that means that bank, the Second National Bank, has $100 less in their deposits, which also means that that money needs to come out from their reserves. Now let's come back to the question of how banks make money, or in this case, the profit. Let's start with First National Bank again. Suppose this First National Bank has a checkable deposits of $100, and we all know they can't use all of their $100 to as part of their lending process. Let's say for the First National Bank has a checkable deposit of $100. So in the asset side, it shows up as a required reserves and excess reserves. Now required reserves is required by law. That means they have to keep it to satisfy the Fed directions. However, this excess reserves is the money that the banks can use for lending purpose, and that's where the asset transformation happens. So now let's see what First National Bank can do. You can see the First National Bank, this excess reserves changed into loans here. So this excess reserve changed to loans. So now excess reserve really doesn't earn anything for the bank, or on a very low interest rate, which is not profitable for the bank. But moment those excess reserves are transformed into loans, it's a lot of profit for a bank, because now banks started earning interest rate at a much higher rate than the interest rate that's earned by the excess reserve. And this is the asset transformation, where basically excess reserve was an asset which was not earning any returns, which transformed into loans. And loans can take different forms, like your student loan, your car loan, your consumer loan, housing loan like mortgages. It can be anything on this. So basically banks earn money because they transform one form of asset into another, and this other form of asset earns higher interest rate, and that the extra money that they keep to run the bank and show them as their profit.